Hello, this is Sheila Bender, and you're listening to In Conversation, discussions on writing and the writing life. Today we have with us writer Susan Bono from Petaluma, California. She's a freelance editor as well as a writing teacher and has edited and published Tiny Lights, a journal of personal narrative, which appeared in print and online from 1995 to 2015. Her work has appeared in anthologies, magazines, and newspapers, as well as on stage and the radio. She currently serves on the boards of the Mendocino Coast Writers Conference and Petaluma Readers Theater, and also edits the Noyo River Review. Her collection of essays, What Have We Here? Essays about Keeping House and Finding a Home, was published in 2014. Right now, her two sons, Lucius and Dante, have left the nest, but she's enjoying midlife with her husband and chickens in Petaluma, California. Welcome to our program, Susan.
Oh, thanks, Sheila. It's great to be with you.
I'm really excited to talk to you not only about your book, What Have We Here? Essays about Keeping House and Finding Home, but also about something I know that you've done, which is retire from Tiny Lights and delved into some other aspects of the writing life. So I hope we get to all of it in our half hour together. But let's start with the fact that you have this book that came out in 2014, a collection of essays, and have been, I know, spending time promoting it. And I'm wondering how that has gone for you and how it's impacted your life to have many audiences that you meet in person and who maybe you meet online as well, talking to you about your book.
It's been really a surprisingly gratifying experience, I have to say. And I will also confess that I'm not a super promoter. I did this more as a personal project to kind of take the last 20 years or so and put it into perspective. And so for me, putting the book together was more for my own purposes. But now that it's gone out in the world, it just sort of is quietly holding its place. And that's actually something that I'm very happy about, because I don't know if you're like me. I think many writers, we're actually sort of shy types, and we don't really like to beat our own drums and toot our own horns about things. So yes, it's just that feeling of when our words can find an audience. And some of us, I guess, want a big splashy runaway bestseller, but I've been very happy with this sort of slow, this little quiet life that my book has. I just noticed the other day that the book is sitting in the window of our local independent bookseller, Copperfield's, in downtown Petaluma, and that made me so happy.
Yes. Well, what was your investigation into? You said you began writing this or began putting it together as an exploration of your last 20 years. What does that mean?
Well, with Tiny Lights, the personal essay journal I'd been publishing, I did a lot of writing for that magazine, but it always felt that my main job there was facilitating other people's writing. And I had been doing writing of my own, but as the years went on, I kind of got more and more focused on the magazine. And so as it became clear to me that while there were many gratifying things about publishing Tiny Lights, as you know, your enthusiasm can wax and wane over time. But if you find it steadily, if you aren't feeling passionate about it, you might as well not do it. So I just felt that I was being called. I didn't know toward what exactly. But that idea that, I don't know, the sense that I needed to, as I shut down the magazine, I needed to kind of look back and see what I had been doing with myself all this time. I've been so busy helping other people. It's like, well, what about me? How did I fit into that?
So what did you find?
I'm one of those people that's always complaining that she's never writing. People say, well, what are you working on? And I say, oh, nothing much. And it was wonderful to discover that I had been busy enough to find enough material to put together into a book. That was totally gratifying.
So you're saying that
one thing.
You looked back at writing you had done in the last 20 years while you were doing Tiny Lights and discovered you had in fact been writing?
Yes. So I had been kind of beating myself up and thinking I hadn't been writing enough or really hadn't been working. But surprise, I had.
Well, I know you're not alone in this idea that a writer writes 8 hours a day, at least 4, and is totally always on top of their projects. I imagine that there are more of us. I include myself in the group that you're talking about who don't see ourselves writing somehow, and it's mysterious. I had a very similar experience recently where I was looking at back through poems. I go to a writing group, I bring poems, I have advice on how to revise them, and I didn't think I had any poems. I found 20. And it was like, where did those come from? And yet I know I go to that group once a month or so. So it's a phenomenon, isn't it? What are we measuring ourselves against?
Yes.
Do you think?
Yes. I think also the interesting thing about you and I and other memoir writers, people who write from their personal experience, it's like I think one of the ironies of my writing life is that I can spend hours and hours in front of a computer with email and people make inquiries and I'm doing editing and various things like that. But we have to live. We have to have lives in order to have something to write about.
Funny thing.
And so, I don't know. I don't know what it is about that sneaking up. I think that, I don't know. I just think that we're awfully hard on ourselves.
I think so too. Maybe we need to honor the fact that as part of our writing lives, we have the energy to facilitate other people's writing, whether it's by editing, teaching, which I know you do as well, putting out, in your case, a journal, building community, and somehow that's as important to us. And I think that maybe if we start from that idea that our work in the writing life and with others is as important to us as our own writing, that maybe we would honor the whole package.
Yes. And yet I also know that there's something about, I don't know about for you, because, I certainly know that you're a wonderful teacher, and that I don't know if you find it the same. It's much easier to tell someone else what to do to improve their writing.
Absolutely.
And I think that there is something, though, about when I am really engaged in a project, if I'm working on a specific piece of writing, that there's something so enlivening about that and so instructive. And I learn so much when I am writing, when I'm actively writing, as opposed to kind of occasionally writing or accidentally writing. And so I think that's part of why I think I'm not writing enough, is that I know that when I am focused on at least some of my week on my own writing, then that just expands my reach in so many ways, and I get a little frustrated. And I love that feeling too of having something that's percolating.
That's wonderful.
I don't know if you have if you've got a little project if you've got a project like that going on, or if maybe we think about that. I haven't been writing, and then you notice you discover 20 poems. It's that your life can be pretty fragmented when you're helping other people, and their words and their stories start mixing in, and you give them your attention, and you almost feel like you're not attending to your own process as much.
And I think what you're saying is absolutely true. Let's go back to what you said about it's easier to help other people know what to do with their writing than sometimes to know what to do with our own writing. So I know in my case, I have first readers, I have a writing group, and I'm not at all ashamed to bring things that are very raw, if that's all I have, and get some response, which keeps me going. It makes me want to continue working on something. So I'm wondering, do you have in your life trusted readers, writing group, or is it something you're more solitary about when you're developing your own writing?
I'm a big fan of trusted readers. I mean, I think that that's really, really important, and I actually do have people that I trust. But it's funny, I also find that when people are looking for feedback for their own writing, I kind of try to make sure that they understand that throwing yourself into a response group too soon can be really detrimental to the process. And so I find that if I'm not careful, I need to work on something in my own solitary way until I feel like I can't work on it anymore. I mean, I love the idea. Some of my friends in my writing groups bring raw stuff, and that gives them a direction to go in. But I can get kind of, especially if there's a lot of conflicting feedback on a piece of writing, then I can get so confused that I can kind of lose my way. So I do tend to keep things kind of under, I don't want to say up my sleeve, but but I play close to the chest.
Uh-huh. And I think that many writers do work like that. I know that one of the most profound things a poet teacher of mine, William Matthews, said was to inform us that the word author has the same root as the word authority. And he said, your writing is your writing. You are the author. You are the authority. And that has helped me at times when I'm confused to stick to the response that meant the most to me and kind of disregard the others if it didn't make sense at that time.
Yes.
I know that you're prepared to read from your book, What Have We Here? And I'm wondering if you could give us the title and maybe something to say about your process of working on it and then read it for us.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Many of my pieces are very short, and in part I think that's because with Tiny Lights, it was a small publication. It was a newsletter format, and I often, the space I allowed myself was about half a page. And so I have a lot of pieces that are, 500 words or fewer. And this happens to be one of the pieces that I included in an issue of Tiny Lights. It's toward the end of my book. What I ended up doing was organizing things chronologically, more or less. And what was interesting to me about that is that I didn't have a particular theme or subject that I was working on all those 20 years. But when I laid things out in order, they did sort of seem to have phases. And because it's called Keeping House, What Have We Here is about sort of my life at home. This is from the last section. The first section is starting out, kind of like, how do we make a home for ourselves? And the second section is holding on. It's kind of like when we've got all the balls flying through the air and we're juggling as fast as we can with kids and just sort of making our established systems, trying to keep them functioning. And then the last section is called Letting Go, and that has a lot of little pieces about the process of, unfortunately, watching the decline of my parents and my mother-in-law, and sort of like learning what it's like. How do we keep our love? What happens to our love when the people we love are no longer with us? And so this little piece is called History Lesson, and it's just one of those little, those ruminations that I had while cleaning out closets and things, and that's something that, I don't know about you, but a lot of my friends are going through that right now. I guess I should read it now.
Absolutely.
Huh? All right. This is History Lesson. I've been rummaging around in already full closets lately, trying to find space for all the stuff I brought home when I emptied my parents' house last May. It's been rough going, but I stopped wondering why when I realized Mom and Dad lived in their last house for 37 years, only 8 years longer than we've lived in ours. Our youngest son often encountered me staring into space, clutching a quilt, wood carving, or photograph. I think my uncharacteristic attempts at organization are making him nervous. "What are you doing? What's that?" he asks. "Oh, well, this is some of your great-aunt Emily's needlepoint," I tell him a little too eagerly. "These are my Barbie clothes, and here are the baby rompers your great-grandmother made for your grandfather back in 1925. You wore them once yourself." I give him these family history updates, knowing full well it's drifting in one ear on its way out the other. At 22, he doesn't have a sentimental bone in his body. But as long as he keeps asking, I continue to supply the disregarded answers. Telling these stories is a kind of test. I'm finding out how much I actually know about the Scotty dog napkin ring, the China baby doll, the anniversary clock, the piece of Native American pottery. If I don't remember what my parents told me about these things, what do they really mean to me? It's just stuff, I heard myself say a few months earlier as I watched people carry off Christmas decorations, books, camping gear, and clothing from the garage sale I organized to clear my parents' attic. But I might as well have said, they're just stories that connect me by an ever-thinning thread to a world that is disappearing. I remember asking my own mother, "What's that? Who are those people?" whenever I caught her sorting drawers or photographs. I thought I was listening to her explanations, but I didn't retain much. the tiny mirrored powder box with the ostrich puff, that silver thimble. I know they were her mother's, but what about the rest of the story? I'm sure she told me more than once, each time straining to remember what her own mother, dead before I was born, had told her. It's only now that I understand how the story of an object becomes more precious than the thing itself when there's no one left to ask about it.
You are listening to KPTZ 91.9 Port Townsend. In case you've just joined us, you are listening to In Conversation with Sheila Bender, discussions on writing and the writing life. Today, Sheila is talking with Petaluma essayist, editor, and publisher Susan Bono.
So what happens next in your book? Where did you go from history lesson?
Well, history lesson, I think I went into some more kind of mournful pieces. Right around that time, we had a lot of losses in our family, and if I wasn't grieving that, I was kind of wondering what I was going to do with all this stuff that I inherited. And I feel like that's kind of, if I were going to do housekeeping too or something, another book about home, it would be this now into this phase of sorting out and kind of lightening my load, and how do we get ready for the last kind of like that last third of life.
That's wonderful. What are you doing as the next project for writing?
Actually, the house cleaning, the lightening of the load is this essential step for my project. I feel like with as busy as I've been, there's a lot of deferred maintenance around my house. I wish I were one of those people who would rise at dawn and, I don't know, go weed the back 40 and paint the fence and stuff. But no, I'd sort of stumble around and get in front of my computer. And so I think that literally moving things around in my life, and our son, our youngest son, Dante, has been out of the house for like 3 years now, but we really haven't converted his room into anything, things like that.
So do you think this will, the phrase deferred maintenance sounds to me like a wonderful title.
Well, I think I'm going to jot that down. I'm going to grab that. And so I don't know, I'm kind of having fun thinking about that, although I have to say that here's another problem with the idea of, I think that many writers have, is that I think, who would want to hear about that? Everybody's doing that.
That's exactly why. By the way, as you were talking about this stage of life where you're getting ready for the last third and you're lightening your load, I'm thinking that is something that would key right in to what so many people are involved in and wouldn't have the skill to articulate the way you do, to explore the way you do. So I would say many, many people would want to hear about that, and that the more particular you can be with your experience, the more universal it is for everybody's, whether they have an empty nest yet or don't, or never had children. We're all facing the fact that the things we collect in life are the stories. And that's what you've told us in History Lesson. And then what do we do when we need to let the stories be the replacement? And deferred maintenance is fabulous, I think, because so many of us defer the spiritual development, the things we need to do next, because we're so busy with our stuff.
Yes.
And I think it's very rich and beautiful. And I want to take a moment to say something that I felt strongly as I was reading your essays. And don't get embarrassed when I say this, but I was hearing a female 21st century E.B. White. And I just was so thrilled to see that kind of essay coming in a woman's voice. I know that your next collection, perhaps called Deferred Maintenance, will be something that will absorb not only you, but the reader. And I know what you mean about, I shouldn't write about my life, it's not that important. But I also know that our exploration of our lives, whatever they are, is important and does touch other people. Yes. And I just want you to know that I was very touched
thank you.
By your essays.
Well, and I hope your readers are listening to this idea, to this notion that our lives, as quiet and seemingly uneventful as we might believe them to be, it is really important to write about them. And one of the most gratifying, satisfying discoveries that I've made is that when people say to me, there are two things that people have said about their experience with my book that I can hardly believe. And one is that quite a few people have said they've read essays to their spouses or their friends. They've read aloud to each other from my book, which it just kind of blows my mind. But the other thing is that several people have said, now I feel more empowered to write about my own life.
Mm-hmm.
That really surprised me, and it was a relief to me because, again, I think that we've gotten we believe that our lives, in order to sell a memoir, in order to get an audience, we have to have had something really, I don't know, kind of wild and crazy.
Right, like hiking the Pacific Coast Trail.
Yes,
and recovering from heroin addiction.
That's right. We need those stories, too. The year of living biblically, or, we need those stories. But I think that there's something to be said about kind of slowing down and kind of looking at the so-called ordinary life and how rich that is. Because most of us, that's all we have.
Right. But also, it is honestly, I think, the ordinary that we resonate with even in the extraordinary stories. The human feelings are the same, of desperation, of needing to heal, of needing to inquire, needing to reach out, needing to find something larger than ourselves. It exists in all the stories. So I think you're absolutely right that there's much to find in a quieter life as well. And in your essays, that quiet life doesn't entail just you thinking about yourself. It entails all this family history, all this raising of children, all this appreciation. That's the E.B. White part I'm seeing of events like in one essay called Crab Surprise. You hear your husband comes home and tells you he's found a $15 crab net. He's going to take one of your children crabbing, but you know that this is a kid who spends his time inside at a computer. But somehow he manages to do this, and there's this little magic ceremony in the evening where the family comes together and really appreciates and enjoys the stories of crabbing and the crab itself. And, those moments are so precious, and you've recorded them and explored them and given them to us. And then we can think about our own lives and how amidst the quiet and maybe the sameness and dailiness are these moments that are just so precious and important. And I'm sure that's why people are reading it to their spouses, reading your essays and being empowered, feeling empowered to write their stories, because you've been a role model for people to really appreciate the moments in their own lives. So I understand completely why you're getting that response to your book. Before we leave today, I'm wondering if you could tell us what you're working on now. And I know it may be that theater project. Yes, actually. It's right now, it's still sort of easier for me to facilitate other people. And so what I'm working on is kind of like, okay, how can I give myself incentive to really develop more regular writing practice for myself? But that's in the works. But yes, it's there's the Petaluma Readers Theater is a small theater company that takes work and reads it word for word, so it's a verbatim sort of thing, and it's not blocked like a regular play. They stand with podiums and they perform the work. It's not memorized. But yes, our the latest project, Jennifer March, the director of Petaluma Readers Theater, and I've been friends for quite a while, and she and I have done material from Tiny Lights when I was publishing Tiny Lights, but now I'm using my network to call for manuscripts on various subjects, and our latest one is on fatherhood. So there's going to be a performance in Petaluma at the end of June, and Sheila, some of your work is going to appear in that. I'm really excited about that. It's really fun putting the call out and for manuscripts. I really, really enjoy doing things like that. And I'm also enjoying the fact that I don't have to do everything by myself. Tiny Lights is basically a one-woman circus. And so now to work with a group like that, or to work with the Mendocino Coast Writers Conference, that I get to be part of a team, and that's really exciting too. That's excellent. I think theater is so wonderful because it is collaborative, and I think you'll find your place to write. Maybe it'll be in the back of the theater. Maybe as you're listening to all those words, you'll want to write some of your own. Yes. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close today? No, it's just that I just think about how important it is
for these kinds of conversations, and I am always so appreciative of the chance to talk about kind of what it means to be a writer and to be affected by words, and curious about what we might have to say or what others have to say about their own process. And so I really appreciate the time talking with you, Sheila.
Well, I do too, and I know the listeners will be very interested in your book. And before we close, I would like to tell them what your website is and how they can find out more about you.
Oh, well, the website is pretty simple. It's SusanBono.com.
All right, and that's SusanBono. And are there still links there, not only to your current work, but to Tiny Lights?
Yes, and Tiny Lights will still pop up. It's still active, although I have yet to make it a more official sort of archived. It's kind of just hanging in space right now, but there's a lot of material up on that website. So that's tiny-lights.com.
Thank you. And that includes, when you say a lot of material, some of the essays that you published over the years of other people?
It's more other people's essays, and then I had also run a monthly writers exchange for about 12 years, where I asked a question every month about the writing process, which is easier, beginnings or endings, or things like that. And so people got to weigh in on these questions and kind of have a conversation, kind of the way you and I are having a conversation, only not in real time. And so there's a lot of kind of fun stuff about that.
Right.
And then I also was very interested, I still am, in the very short form. I'm calling them instant essays, and I like to think I'm kind of coining that term, but the idea of essays that are 500 words or fewer. And so there are a lot of examples of that in a section called Flash in the Pan.
Thank you. So, Susan, it sounds to me like people who got interested in our conversation can extend our conversation by checking out tiny-lights.com, as well as your website, susanbono.com. And again, I want to thank you so much for talking to us this morning.
Oh, thank you, Sheila.
You have been listening to In Conversation, Discussions on Writing and the Writing Life with Sheila Bender. For more of Sheila's interviews, please go to Sheila's website, www.writingitreal.com/audio.
In Conversation is produced by Sheila Bender and edited by Charlie Fleischman. Announcer is Kurt Vanderslice.